Hello and welcome along to the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your host, Zain Nabi, and today we've got an extra special show for you. I'm coming live to you from Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm right here on the beautiful lake, as you can see behind me, and we're here to celebrate with some family and friends in the Wisconsin and Illinois area. Well, listen, today we have a real treat for you. We have a retro roundtable talking about the lack of diversity in football management. It was recorded by my company, Trinity Media and Events, in the British summer. It is a really illuminating discussion chaired and led by the Sports Journalists Association President Darren Lewis, alongside a pretty blockbuster lineup. Think of somebody like, Dwight Yorke, the former Manchester United legend and treble winner. He's a part of the panel. He talks about some of his challenges trying to get into management. We are also joined by Kevin Davies, a former Premier League stalwart, and The Athletic's David Ornstein, a journalist who has one of the finest reputations in the world. Now, Dwight was specifically brilliant about outlining how he has tried to find work and get roles in football management across many continents and many leagues. He's been endorsed by Sir Alex Ferguson, and he has done all his required coaching badges. But he is still struggling to find work, at least he was in the summer. The good news is the story ends well. Dwight has a role now at Trinidad and Tobago. That was his former national team. He's managing there, and he's looking after that national team. But the wider lessons and points made during the roundtable still hold true for today. So I'll hand over to Darren Lewis, my friend and the amazing host of this panel. You are certainly going to enjoy it, and I guarantee you'll learn something about why our football structures are not as diverse and inclusive as they should be.
Dwight, you were in charge of MacArthur FC in the A-League. First of all, are you surprised that you had to go out there, you had to leave the English game, given what you've achieved, to get a job?
Not really, if I'm being honest. I've been in England for nearly 30 years. I understand the concept. And before I venture into the management department, I had the experience of being global ambassador for Manchester United, which was incredible, a great job.
What does that consist of?
Sorry?
What does that consist of?
Well, apart from the playing side, you obviously no longer play the game, but you get to see the club from a different perspective, representing the club from all aspects, traveling the world, doing that kind of stuff, interacting with the fans and the sponsors, and traveling with the team on the pre-season tours and getting involved and, being very much part of a family that you built there.
See, there are lots of people who would say that's a terrific job. Why would you give that up? And I would imagine you're well looked after. Why would you give that up to become a manager? But you really want to do that, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've never wanted for being in a comfort zone, and as much as the job of being a global ambassador of Man United, which I'm very grateful and honored, and it's amazing everything that goes with it. Quite a privileged position to be in as well. There is some burning desire in me. I don't know what it is. I've always said I'm a bit different to the norm, and I listened to Kevin's story there. I'm quite the opposite. And the biggest single factor in all of it was the commitment, because I was experiencing from after I retired from football, did a little bit of media, then obviously get into the Man United when I got the call to become the global ambassador alongside Andy Cole and Brian Robson and Dennis Owen. These are global brands, and he thought, wow, this is amazing. Why would I want to walk away from such a lucrative position and a privileged one? But there's something in there, and I have to be totally honest with myself. I've never taken the easy option, and it's not that it isn't an easy option. But I felt that, football is in the DNA. I've said from the very beginning I wanted to be somebody different and do something differently to no other person I've done. And I managed to do that in my playing career, coming from the Caribbean, to be the first to ever do that, and obviously gone on to win the other trophies that I've managed to win in my playing career. So now I want to do this as a manager. And I know that there was going to be challenges and the difficulties. And I never forget when I shared a story with Andy Cole and said to him that I'm going to go into management. And he looked at me like, you must be crazy. what planet are you on? Literally, he was looking at me, and this is a
Why
somebody that I
did he
trust.
think you were crazy to do it?
I just think the simple fact that he tried it himself, and he's obviously born here and know the difficulties in black managers being given the opportunity to manage. And he said, you're losing your marbles. What were you thinking? Because he just doesn't feel it will succeed. And he says, good luck with it. I never forget his word to me in a sort of a brother loving way, but it tells me a lot just looking into his eyes that this was not going to be working out well for you in the long run. I don't know why he thought that, but the more that when he said it, I feel that the challenge was on. I feel like I can define the odds. And so for me, the biggest thing was to commit to the cause. And we talk about the A license and, crossing the T's and dotting the I's and make sure that you get all the qualification. I probably can get a little bit deeper, although I know in the past he doesn't need all that qualifications to get in to management. And so I've been able to go back, cross the T's, dot the I's, as well as at the time Man United was very understanding of me doing that and kept me on as a global ambassador to do the jobs while I was sort of completing my pro license. But I feel like for me to break into management, I needed to get the full qualification. There was no other way into management. So I had to go back and study for a further 2 years. After completing my A license, I had to go back and do the pro license for 18 months before, and then try to move the needle again, which was even more challenging to get to that. And so, yeah, the roads are very challenging, very tough. I expected it to be tough. I don't expect it to be any easier, and it certainly hasn't got any easier going forward.
Well, it wasn't easy, of course, when you started, but while you were in Australia, you joined them at Macarthur FC in July 22. You won the cup final 3 months later, but then you left the following January. Why was that?
Well, first to begin with, my first job, which I was very lucky into actually management, was the all-star team against Barcelona in Sydney, in front of 75,000 people. I was given 3 days to prepare this all-time all-star team. I mean, it doesn't come much more daunting than that. And Xavi and his team and all these big hitters turned up, and I'm thinking, this is unreal. These are players that I don't know. I have no idea. I was put in, and Danny Townsend, who was the head of Australian Federation, says, Dwight, welcome to Australia. You only have 3 days to put this team in. And they thought, obviously because of my success there as a player, I played there as a player and had success there under Sydney. He thought this would be a fitting way to introduce me to management. And so a lot of people thought we were going to get absolutely obliterated in terms of the results. And I loved it. I enjoyed the whole ambience, the first test of intermanagement in such a spectacular arena with that huge amount of crowd against iconic teams, the best team in one of world football as Barcelona, and relatively unknown team. And to come out today with my head held up very high and really good performance by the All-Star team. And we're a bit unlucky. We ended up losing the game 3-2. So that was my first real introduction, a real good test. And after that, I thought I could probably overcome anything after that, because I really thought we could have probably gotten beaten in a really bad way, and that would have shed a really difficult light to sort of bounce back from. But instead, I came out of it feeling really confident, really positive because of the result, because of the response, especially the timeline I had to work with these players in a 2-3 day period of time, relatively unknown, and come out with a lot of credit. And I felt, wow, that shuttle was finally off. I can now consider myself a manager. And then on the back of that, obviously got the job at Macarthur. And so my first intention when I spoke to the CEO / the chairman as well, there was a bit of speculation. I had my good friend Mark Busnich down there, so he gives me a little bit of an insight. Obviously, playing there, I had an insight as to the level of competition I was going into, so I had a good feel about it. They were relatively unknown. MacArthur, 3 years into the A League, got the owners and the CEO really want to elevate the western part of Australia, want to elevate MacArthur in a way, and they felt that I was the right person. After speaking to them, I had a good feel factor about it. It was non-negotiable when I said to him I needed my assistant to come with me. So they agreed that. So that was a good starting point or a good base to build on, because sometimes you want to get into management and you take it for the wrong reason. I felt this was a good step, but I needed my assistant alongside me. I could work with the other people. I was very fortunate being in Australia before. There was the fitness guy, my fitness trainer. He was part of Sydney FC when I was there. So I inherit somebody again who I know, which made that transition easy. And for me, the first thing I wanted to do was to make an impression, an impact. And I think that was key. And so when I went and see the facilities, I thought, wow, well, I kind of know what I was walking into. I thought, this is not really good. But I got lucky because there was a new sort of recreational sort of facilities was building on the side of where we were training. So then that's how it involved, and I decided to move the training facilities over to that. So I wanted the players to come in and have a different perspective, something new idea that they were buying into. And so that culture, I was trying to build that culture in terms of a gym and all that. So immediately I made that impact, and the players kind of, I keep going back, you need the players to buy into your ideas. And of course they did. And so I got off to the best possible start. The cup competition, which is slightly different, they play that very early on before the league starts. And I got obviously the results, and that's kind of set the stall out. And so going ahead, as the season got along, I felt that the team was picking up momentum. We were playing some fantastic football. We were really a threat to lots of the teams there. And of course, winning the cup really elevated us into a real threat going forward throughout the league. And for me, the disappointment of leaving MacArthur in the way that I did, that I didn't complete what I set out to do. Even though I won the cup, I feel that the opportunity to win the league was taken away from my hands because of a decision that was made, obviously above my pay grade.
It sounds like you both got a lot in common. You try to change the culture, you make a few steps forward, and then you encounter, shall we say, decision making from above that kind of stunts your growth and your careers. I just want to stick with you if I can for a second, because you said, I've interviewed you before for a broadcast. I remember you saying that you might have to maybe join forces with other black ex-pros to buy a club in order to get a managerial opportunity. Do you still stand by that?
I still think that's possibly is a way forward. And the reason why I said it, you know, because often enough when you've been invited on these conversations, you have maybe a little 2 or 3 minutes to explain yourself. We have a platform here today to kind of more extend into more details and based on facts. And I've always believed in fairness. I always believe that there is a fairness here that is not seems to be on an even playing field. Certainly when it comes to black managers. And of course, doing my due diligence work and my research and everything else, the more I dig into the facts and the figures, it just doesn't add up. And so, you know, people tend to say, oh, sometimes you do call out the racist card or you're playing the racist card, but that's not the case. I'm not here for that. I'm here because of the facts and figures doesn't add up in my opinion, and it shows. You know, in the Premier League, the 30 years or the 32 years of the Premier League, there was 11 black managers, right?
That's a staggering statistic.
Well, those are facts, so I'm not making it up. You know, I'm not here just calling out these numbers. These are total facts in the game. So in 32 years of the Premier League, you were telling me there's only been 11 black managers in that period of time.
Kevin, you've played with some inspirational players. Does 11 black managers over 32 years surprise you?
Yeah, I think so. It's obviously, it's quite a sensitive subject, I think, in terms of, for me, it's kind of, it doesn't make sense because I've sat with the club selecting the new manager, and for me, it will always be the best person for the job, and the skin colour would not even cross my mind. So to think that a chairman, an owner, a director is saying he's quite good, but he's black, I don't see it. I can't understand it. Maybe it does happen, but I can't see it.
I think it's a big part of why it's important to have a conversation, because I don't know if people do think that. No. I don't think they do think
But I think it's one. I sat on that process, for instance, which is not a Premier League team. It's a lower league team. But I said, look, I will come and help you. You've made some poor appointments. You're going to be, if you carry on, you're going to be down here somewhere. So let me use my experience, my contacts. Come and sit with the director of football, new ownership. Let's make sure we get this one right. That was me offering my services. Didn't have to take it, but so my affiliation with the club, he did. And it was a case of looking through the CVs, the applications, and trying to narrow it down based on the team. I spoke to you before. It's about the situation of the club. It's not often you get a top job as a manager, because it's normally you get someone who's struggling, who's been sacked, right? So they were in the bottom league, sacked the manager, and it was a case of the ownership panicking a little bit. We need a safe pair of hands. So if Dwight Yorke's CV landed on the desk, which it didn't for this job, would they go down that path with him, a bit of inexperience? Probably not in that situation with that club. So that's for me, going through that process, it was getting the right, and it was 2 white guys it was now down to. And my opinion is this one, the director of football was this one, the directors were all there, everyone had an opinion, and yet all white directors, by the way, and owners, right? And they made the decision. That was the process that I experienced firsthand. And from my point of view, of course, it's not a race thing. I didn't know half the people on there were the white or black anyway, because there were people that I didn't quite know. But for that club at that time, it was important that they got the right manager, and that's the 2 we now.
But Kev, sorry, but Kev, but for you, that's fine, and I get it, and we're not here to name drop, but there are people in the game are getting job, like you're saying,
I get that.
Are dropping on that. Who
I get that.
Certainly doesn't qualify for the job. If you talk about the experience, i.e., my name hasn't dropped on it, but if it did, you're talking about the best man for the job. But there are players, there are people in the game who has that kind of experience, but getting big jobs.
I get it. I get that totally.
Well, let me bring David in, because I mean, we spoke earlier in the show about Gareth Southgate, and he himself a few years ago was very open about the fact that he didn't have the required qualifications to get the Middlesbrough job, and yet he handed it, and he was open about the fact that he had been a beneficiary of who he was. What does 11 black managers over 32 years say to you?
It says that it's become sort of ingrained in the game, a way of appointing, a psyche, a mentality, the type of options that the decision makers think about, that has become subconscious. I don't, to Kev's point, want to imagine that the colour of somebody's skin would ever come into the thinking process. I'd like to agree. Not that I've been in the position to select, but it would be abhorrent to think that that does come into it. More so, these decision makers are perhaps, and there are multiple factors here, become used to the same faces, the recommended faces, the endorsed faces, and they happen to not be black, mostly. There could be merit in many situations where the only candidates on the list that decision makers have been given by people at other points of the process, analysts and whoever, headhunters. You know, it's not just the people at the top of the tree. There's a system here, and they've not got that question to answer because it's just white candidates in front of them. That, you know, the EFL tried to bring in the equivalent of the Rooney Rule from NFL, gridiron in the States. It appears...
It's voluntary, isn't it?
It was never enforced upon clubs, which you could say was wrong in the first place.
And there's a loophole. If you don't have the shortlist, you can just go directly to the manager, one manager to
it's
interview,
only if you're conducting a process.
Yeah, but if
you're not, if you've got your chosen candidate,
you don't have to.
And it didn't apply to the Premier League either.
Let me jump across to you on that, because you highlighted that. What do you make of
that? I think it's I mean, on my master's course, we had Michael Johnson in there, who was the most qualified ex-player he's got everything. And he was the same as Dwight, struggled to get job interviews and would put it down to race based on everything. He couldn't be more qualified. Ended up getting a job, I think it was Guinea, and did pretty well there, got him to the CONCACAF and did well. I think he's doing work with the FA now and bits and bobs here and there. So.
What was your reaction when he put it down to race?
It was a debate for the room. I don't know what to say really. You can put it down to interview process. I mean, we talked about this before. We don't get taught how I didn't have a CV. I didn't know how to do an interview. I've never had an interview in my life. So I know managers that have got jobs based on the interview. But getting to the interview is a problem. I don't know if you've managed to get to the interview process.
I haven't had an interview.
So you haven't had an interview. So that's the first hurdle to get to interview, isn't it? And then have the opportunity to present who you are and how you're going to change things. So if you can't get to that point, he had the same problem. He couldn't get to interview. I think he said once he took his name off the CV and just sent the CV and got a bit of, because the CV was stacked, and he said he got an interview on the back of that, which is, I can't remember the conclusion of the interview. It was a bit kind of, you can't quite believe that's
Is there
the
a
case.
subconscious comfort among those making these decisions with what they know and who's on the circuit? It almost becomes a self-fulfilling cycle in the managers who have been able to get the jobs are then in the position, and it's the same across many industries.
It's a crazy industry though, isn't it? You keep getting fired, but you keep getting jobs. I mean, that must upset someone like you trying to get the opportunity that a manager can get sacked 3, 4, 5 times.
I tell you what I think is happening, and it's not hard to say what I think it is. I think there's a general feeling among the black managers or among ex-players that there is a sense that you're not competent enough to run the organization. I think that is, for me, what seems to come out, because what else would it possibly be? Because you can't be from an athlete's perspective how good you are and how fantastic you've been. But then when it comes to run the organization, which is to manage up, manage down, I just feel that there is a sense that you're not clever enough, if to put it bluntly. You're not clever enough to do that type of job. And to back it up, I hate to say, but I'm in a group chat at this point in time. A group chat that I very take little partake, but I'm added to this group chat. And there is 180 ex-players on it, all black.
180.
180 of them, of us, including myself. And there must be a reason for that. And I can tell you, I talk about the level playing field. That's the reason why. They don't feel it is. And it's hard to take.
Is there a feeling amongst yourself and fellow black ex-players, coaches, peers, that they don't want to go forward now for these opportunities? Or so I know Sol Campbell very well, and I spent a lot of time with him when he was managing at Macclesfield, and some of the challenges he encountered. And I mean, this is one of the most successful and high-profile England players of all time, club and international level. And he's done his courses and his badges, he's studied, he's travelled, he's immersed himself in the right people and information. and then he sees less qualified fellow former players who have maybe done far inferior groundwork to get themselves into the frame, suddenly just given a managerial opportunity like that. And I wonder if you guys are being so beaten by this process, where are people not wanting to go in as much now for these, and then there are less names in the frame, and it's almost giving people with conscious or subconscious biases less of a question to answer. Is the door being knocked at harder than ever? And if it is, that's even more concerning. Or are those knocks becoming softer and softer because of this completely unacceptable experience?
Just before you answer that, I'll just give you some details on Sol Campbell, because every time his name is mentioned, there are lots of misconceptions about how good a job he has done. He was appointed manager of Macclesfield on November 27, 2018. They were bottom of League Two. They were 5 points adrift of safety. Under him, he saved them, basically, from relegation. They stayed up on the last day of that season with a 1-1 draw against Cambridge. 8 wins and 12 draws from 30 games in charge. He went to Southend, and they had financial constraints which prevented him from signing any new players during the transfer window, and then the season was ended early due to the pandemic. They were second from bottom, and they had a decision not to restart the season, which meant they were relegated. So there were lots of issues completely beyond Sol Campbell's control, which led to the relegation of that club. But the point you make, the general point you make, is that Sol's gone to a club, had done a fantastic job, and on the basis of that job would have expected to get a better job, and yet he's had a more difficult job to do. And I think there might well be merit in your idea that perhaps some managers, some black managers, are thinking, what's the point? We've seen some younger players from our generation articulate their frustrations and say, what's the point? You joked about Andy Cole saying to you, what's the point? But I think the general point is to raise it. Even when we raise this, and we will post elements of this on social media, there will be people, as there have been when we did our initial interview, who will push back. They will say it's all about the best person for the job. It's a figment of imagination. How dare you even infer that there is an issue? And there are all sorts of things that you do need to push back at when you do raise this. But it's real. And I think the starting point for this conversation, as you say, is to accept it is real. But just to answer his question, just to give you the opportunity to answer that, do you think that knock is becoming softer because maybe black potential managers are so disillusioned and have had their confidence eroded?
There's a lot of self-belief that is happening there now, I can tell you. And the simple reason behind it is because the opportunity is simply not there. Now, I remember saying, when I started off, for example, when I first tried to get in at Villa, they asked if I had my qualifications. And I said, no, but I had my A license. Because I've been in football long enough, I know exactly the protocol of how to get in. You know, you don't need your full, because we talked about ex-players being able to be given that chance. You thought, well, you're probably in that same boat, right? So I was told to go away and get your pro license, so which I've gone away and crossed the T's and dot the I's. I think there's a lot of black players now, ex-black players, who have been told the same. I've gone away and get their pro license. So that they have done what is required of ask of them to what they needed to do. But the opportunity still doesn't exist, right? And so the knock are starting to get less and less, despite they've gone away and got their qualifications. And that is the truth and the harsh reality of the situation right now.
It's quite stark that Sol, for example, but he's not the only person in this position, had to go down to a team that was cut adrift at the bottom of the Football League. And it's not fair for us to name names, but he has white peers who have been given jobs at the top level in domestic and European football. So you're told to go away and do your time. Many coaches are of any colour, persuasion, even in our industry, do your time, learn television and radio, and you do. And he went down there and he did a good job. And that's when you start to scratch your head about what's going on here. And I'm really curious. I was really curious to ask you if you've detected anything within conversations or interviews that set alarm bells ringing, or that you didn't feel you were so equipped or they were looking for, but you've just said you haven't even had interviews.
No.
And that just blows my mind.
We haven't I haven't even get to the interview stage, because you can't present yourself. How do they know you as an individual, right? You have to have that interview to then submit your ideas, your playing philosophy, obviously the compatible, you're in line with what the club is trying to achieve, those kind of stuff. You don't have that 1v1 conversation.
No feedback?
It's not no feedback. You didn't have a clue where to turn to. It's very
So the levels, I mean, have you gone in for the Blackburn job recently? Did I read that or not?
No, I haven't really. Well, no, I haven't gone in for Blackburn.
So I
went in for Sunderland.
I'm like trying to take the colour of skin out of things. I'm looking at the process from a club. So, let's say Sunderland or someone.
Sunderland.
Like you want that job, but flip it round that you're sat on the board for that job, and Dwight Yorke comes. Would you look at the CV in terms of experience, or would you see Dwight Yorke as a bit of a risk, but I know you haven't got to the interview process, but we like what we're hearing in that process. Would you see it as a bit of a risk to take him on? Or would you, look, before I mentioned the safe pair of hands, is Dwight Yorke a risk with his lack of experience at that level? Or would you go to a League Two, League One, National League and get that on the CV, do well, and then go that way? How do you see that?
Well, my answer to that is that we have seen managers been given those opportunities at that level.
Yeah, and they probably failed most of them as well.
And fail. We've seen the experienced managers been given that opportunity at that level and fail. Yeah. You just look at the scenario that is happening at Sunderland in itself. There are people with vast experience, right? You're looking for young, ambitious ambitious managers who had now got a CV been building, went to Australia, done got a win percent of 53% win rate, win a cup, played for the club, won the league with them. I think you got something building there. Your argument is like, okay, a guy who's been involved in football, multiple winner as a player, you kind of pick in the box. I mean, okay, might not be experience-wise in terms of longevity, in terms of being out there, but it's someone who in his DNA is a football man, because that's what I am. I'm a football man. I've studied the game. I've got all the qualification that is required. I mean, what else is there that you need to do? How are you going to get your chance as a player if Sam Allardyce didn't take that opportunity to give you that chance?
Do you think some of these falls on your connections in terms of getting roles? And
I was going to ask about that. What convinces an owner or chairman or chief executive or headhunter to take the risk on a manager who ends up failing at a Sunderland, a white manager, and not even speak to who might be a risk CV-wise with black-coloured skin? What's the difference? Is it the connections, the people around them, the representatives, who you know, not what you know is a phrase in all of our industries, the wrong friends of owners versus the right friends of owners? How has a Vincent Kompany got his opportunity? Does he have advocates and people vouching for him, or a Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink?
But very often, aren't these players all in the same stable?
They have been as players, but then is the black manager prioritised by the stable, the agency, in a way that maybe a white coach candidate is? I don't know.
It's interesting because when David was going through, he's making his point about several white managers who have had jobs without experience. I heard a nod of acknowledgement from
Yeah.
yourself. Elaborate on that.
I just think it's, I mean, Dwight Yorke is a big name in the Premier League, so I understand the frustration. Frank Lampard, Gerrard, Rooney have all gone in pretty early without the experience, so that's where your frustration comes from. I know that. But how have they got the jobs? Is it just the name? Do they interview amazingly well? Because we touched on it, that people interview amazingly and they get jobs on the back of it. I know 2 or 3 managers that have done it who have, you know, been in and around me and stuff, interviewed amazingly well, but then can't quite back it up with the coaching, with the tactics, everything that it takes to run a football club. But they interview well, and there are schmoozers, aren't they? People that keep getting jobs. People that, you know, I look at Martinez, for instance. He's got another job, but not really, you know, succeeded other than win the cup and gone down with Wigan, but gets a great job. So, you know, there's certain names that seem to somehow keep it going, don't they? And I can understand that's probably why you're smirking and laughing, because that's the frustration, isn't it, you know?
Well, you made a really good point earlier on when you were talking about one particular appointment that was made, and you said it was an all-white board, wasn't it? Yeah. So I'll just give you some numbers. In the Premier League, 43% of players are black, but just 1.6% are in executive leadership positions, and 4.4% are in management. But I do want to point to the interview that I did with you, Dwight, because when we did it and we posted it on social media, we had a lot of negative responses. So I thought I'd bring a few to the table, and you can answer them. Can whiz through these, because George says, "Why should you have a divine right to get a job?"
There's no divine right. There's no such thing as divine right. It's just the opportunity. It's just being in a playing field. When you qualify and you do your masters, for instance. You know, you qualify yourself. You've done your studies. You've done all the qualifications. You need an opportunity. It's the same. It's no different to that.
Simon says, "Clubs don't care what colour anyone's skin is. If they think you'll get results, you'll get hired. Yorke is likely just not very good in interviews and doesn't impress."
Well, I don't have an interview, so I can't really know what he's talking about. There was no interview there. I've never been interviewed for the job.
Okay. Lee says, I'm going to bring you in after this one, David. As for Dwight, media coverage of his personal life makes him an unpopular appointment, big barrier. And actually, when I looked through, there were quite a few talking about your personal life, your relationship with a former partner. She was a celebrity. How would you like to respond to that?
Well, what's that got to do with football? That's your personal life, right? I think personal life, I know it probably has a little bit of an effect on as an individual, I suppose, but takes nothing away from your job, which is what you're good at. If you're good at your job, then your personal life, I think everybody has issues. We know for a fact there's people in the game today that has major issue in their life and still working in the game. So, you know, it seems like I've been made a bit of a scapegoat there, but that's what it is.
I think that's a complete cop-out of a reason. There are people with all manner of background, personal issues, playing, managing, coaching. Some are more high profile than others. There are some with more high profile examples than Dwight. I think it's really easy to give some of these responses. You see with certain black managers on social media, they say, because he's an expletive. They just say he's, you know, the equivalent of an idiot or something like that. It's just very cheap, baseless reasoning that's unscientific. And I don't know if this permeates into the consciousness of the people handing out these jobs, thinking, that's going to be a hassle we're going to have to navigate our way through, where we've got this easier candidate that we can turn to. I think there's a lot of dodging the reality from the public, from the game, and ignoring or not wanting to front up to the fact that it's a really big problem. You mentioned that percentages of non-white people in executive positions, but how many non-white people are owning the Premier League clubs, because they are the real ultimate powers, and that perhaps then filters down. Now, that's very difficult to change and might never happen, but at some point somewhere, somebody's got to stand up here and take responsibility on every side of it, from the executive level, from the candidate level. If people are backing off, damaged by the experience, then that's not good. It needs to be discouraged. But I come back in my head to, I want to know how Patrick Vieira has managed to get himself into positions. I mentioned Vincent Kompany before. We've got all the Chris's, brilliant guys and friends like Chris Powell, Chris Ramsey, and there's a Chris that I'm forgetting. Chris Houghton. Sorry. Deeply offensive to another good friend, but they have done something that has, they've probably gone way above and beyond, but to break through in their own way. And that needs to somehow be replicated and spread to increase fairness. I would argue to some of those questions, all somebody like Dwight Yorke is asking for is an opportunity to speak.
I think that number staggers me, though. The 180 staggers me. I didn't think it would be anywhere near that, because I think is it 43% of Premier League players are black at the minute? I mean, that's a brilliant stat, isn't it? If you think about it, I was thinking back to when I started, what that stat would be in the League One or where it was back then. It'd be considerably lower, wouldn't it? So I was thinking, coming down here today, if it was 10, 15% back then, I don't know what the number was. Yeah. Does that mean there's 10, 15%, ex-players who are black in that, if you're looking at numbers and stats? But I see in the future now, if there's 44%, it's probably going to get higher, maybe. Yeah. Does that mean there's going to be more ex-black pros in the next 5 to 10 years who want to manage? Is that number going to get even higher? Or is it just based on the numbers that I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and it does make perfect sense, because the levels are only going to get higher in terms of the black contingent within the Premier League. But if the ownership model continues to stay the same, then the problem is going to continue to stay the same. And it's a question of seeing if we can find a way through. But like you say, I think it's more culture rather than malevolence, if you like, and rather than a conscious will of people to deny jobs on the basis of the colour of their skin. But there are ingrained attitudes and beliefs within our sport which are handing opportunities or ensuring that opportunities are handed to one demographic of guys who have achieved exactly the same things as another. I did a few tweets. I know you're here, you two been getting on like house on fire, but you tweeted as well. Yeah. I'm going to read it. You said, I did my A licence with Dwight, lovely lad. However, he spent most of his time during our 2-week-long course on the golf course. Rocked up for an hour in the afternoon occasionally when we were out on the grass. Great player, but lost loads of respect from the other candidates on that course, and his actual sessions were poor. Maybe he should have put in more effort learning how to coach and put on a decent session. The fact that he's won trophies as a player does not entitle him to walk into certain jobs, does it? Now, the first thing I thought about when I read this was I actually thought about university, because when we went to university, there would have been loads of people on our courses who, in between lectures, would have been refueling, shall we say, or maybe
Liquid
doing
lunch.
a few other things, but actually passed the course and have got quite good jobs. Yeah. But I know you were quite, well, what was your reaction to that?
Well, first to begin with, I know Kev, so I was a bit stunned the fact that he tweeted that. Like, you're entitled to your opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's hurtful a little bit more when it comes from a person that you know, and certainly did the course, and I accept what he said, because I did golf in my hour time, went and hit some golf balls, because that was my way of comforting, because we were there for 2 weeks, and just constantly football. I need to venture my hour spending, or my hour time of break was to go and And some of the guys probably like to sit around and have a chat and try and do but I picked up on the course, which is, it's about opinions and all that. And I went through a phase where my sister had passed away at that time, and I needed to get away. I didn't, that was my way of getting away from all of it, and maybe didn't share that sort of personal grievance with the guys in and around me. So yeah, I mean, when Kev tweeted, I got on the phone and you kind of, says, well, that's not like Kev, that's not the Kev. So it kind of affected me that way, because you know that now that I'm fully qualified, I've gone through the phase, and everybody's got a different way. I've gone on to pass my pro license, and so it shows that I was committed. Maybe at that particular time, it was a difficult time for me to then get my head around it in terms of completing it. But I managed to withstand it, got through it, and then gone on to doing the pro. So for me, it was a little bit disappointed, I have to say, but nothing against Kev. I think he's
your
entitled
mates
to
now.
it.
Can't tear you away from each other.
No,
that was
listen,
fine.
I'm here to obviously front up, and obviously a bit of trepidation coming in about what it's going to be about, and it is unlike me. So firstly, I want to apologise, because it shouldn't have been done publicly, so I'm man enough to say that. So I apologise. Just obviously being in and around it, and I think your peers are quite important, I think. And this, I'm still in touch with quite a few of the boys there, and they have a similar opinion to what I tweeted. So I think, if you're saying to me you've got a burning desire to be the manager, then I didn't miss a minute. I was there for the whole duration. I think you had some weekends where you had some commitments, maybe for media, or I know Pete Schmeichel went off, and so if you turn it around, you think this is my priority. It's this. So that's where it was coming from. I shouldn't have done it publicly. It's totally out of character, and it's a personal slant on you. And I hope it doesn't affect you moving forward. People do talk a lot in football. It's not like the older days where you get a name, take the job. People, even the work that I've done since I've retired, will do a lot of digging into a player, a coach, a manager, and dig right the way back to make sure they get the appointment right, whether it's a player, coach, manager, director of football, whatever it may be. So I sincerely apologise. I hope you get the opportunity, Dwight. I really do. And it's just, taking on board what people maybe think about you and trying to improve that, or if it's an interview process, I don't know what it is. You're obviously telling me you've done everything you can and you want to get that opportunity, and I just hope you get it, mate. I mean, I've got good connections in the game. I can pretty much get to anyone at any level, I think, through a phone call. Your connections must be amazing. How have you not gone to the Salford boys and said, give me a chance? You must have so many, because you look at Gary Neville going to Valencia because he knows the boss. Scholesy goes in at Salford because Oldham, but all these connections. How has that gone? Do you not like doing it because of your mates, or have you done it?
I've reached out to everybody.
And what's the general?
I've reached out to far globally. Unbelievable. There is not a day that go by that I don't look or know there is a job vacancy that I haven't really not tried for. And there's people in the game that I'm very well connected to. As you know, the connection, as you said, I've got that in the game. And I've reached out. I've got the great man himself. So Alex, he's given me a written, he given me as well. I have it at home right now, a written.
But it isn't just that. I know that you travel all over the world, don't you? You watch training. Just tell us a bit about that.
I mean, so Alex came down to Australia and visit me at Macarthur. That's the connection I have with Sir Alex Ferguson. I don't know for other people, but for me, the gaffer has been incredible.
And you also went and you chatted with Arsene Wenger.
I was in a 3 weeks, the Asian Cup that took place just before the World Cup in Qatar. I was part of FIFA technical director. I worked with Arsene Wenger being the head of that technical director of FIFA. Steve McLaren was the other one who got me in because of my connection with Steve. And then Klinsmann was the other one. So I went and studied the Asia Cup for a month. And at the end of that, having to pick the best team or the players from all the different Asia teams, countries, and select the best player in that tournament. So I've done all my due diligence and work behind the scene. And who better to have someone like Arsene Wenger, Steve McLaren, Jurgen Klinsmann as your mentor, learning that type of stuff, that, you know, the technical side of analyzing the team and breaking them down. Every day we were traveling, as you were saying, we were traveling from one game to the next. We were having to jump in one car, get there, analyze, take that game, watch that game, break it down, and get to the next game before it started. So those are the type of the works that you're doing. And I've reached out of everywhere, from Australia to America, to South Africa, to Cyprus, England, Dubai, Qatar, in the Middle East. There is not a job that is going and you can't get in. And you wonder what is the reason behind it. And it's astonishing. And it could easily break you. I can tell you, but I'm not that type of individual. It actually inspired me to define the odds. That's the individual I've always been.
It'd be much easier to walk away.
Yeah, and I knew all along this wasn't going to be an easy ride. I can tell you that. And for what it's worth, you got to work your way through it, right? Because as I said, with the profile and now the experience and now the qualifications and you win a cup, you think that transition would be a little bit more easier. I find it much more challenging. I am prepared to go anywhere in the world to work because I do believe that I can go there and be successful, get the experience, and continue. Seen managers in the past, they don't all start in England, they go away. Roy Hodgson, Potter, those type of guys, they all gone away and build their CV. I know that from a person that living in England all these years, understand the culture, understand the people, I came into this country knowing that I had to do 3 times more to be successful. And I have to do the same now. Although I've made the grade and I've surpassed that as a player, I have to do exactly the same as a manager before I've been taken serious. I have to go away, and I'm prepared to do the work. I have to go away to these countries and get W's, keep winning, keep building up your CV. And then that way, eventually, 3-4 years, I'm not ready for the Premier League. If it happens, great. But in 3, 4, 5 years from now, because it's not just a short term, it's a long-term goal, right? I don't just want to be a manager for 2 or 3 years. I want to be a manager for the next 10 to 12 years. But I have to build my CV up. And by doing that, I have to maybe leave the country.
Can I just ask how somebody like Vincent Kompany, a man that I admire greatly, he didn't have an amazing record in Belgium and got the Burnley job, and he came up to the Premier League fantastically, but then got relegated, and he's now been appointed to one of the biggest jobs in world football. Yeah,
incredible. But that's a one-off, right? How many other black managers been given that? We talk about Southgate, for instance, as an example, if in reference to Vincent Kompany, not done great. Got England under 21s, then elevate himself to England senior team without doing much. But at least you got Vincent Kompany, blizz the championship, get relegated. I think he deserves a pass, in my opinion, when you compare to what is been
I just mean to say that it might not even be the W's that you talk about.
Right. But for me, I can only talk about me as an individual. I am not blindsided by this. I understand it. I understand the concept. I had to do it as a player. I had to do it as a player because the moment I left the shores of the Caribbean and come into England, I couldn't be on the same playing field. I had to be better. And that's what drives me forward as an individual. And that is exactly the same mentality I have as a manager.
We're running out of time, but how do we move this conversation on, in your opinion?
I think it's just more conversations like this. I think it's a great platform for you, Dwight, particularly to showcase your skills. And sometimes we don't know what goes beneath the surface of certain individuals, but I think it's more conversations, more topics like this, and hopefully, I honestly don't know what the answers are, but I just think the more we talk about it.
What's your view, having been involved in this conversation?
Yeah, again, a bit staggered by some of the numbers and some of the facts. Obviously aware of some of the, the percentages and those small little details, but I think just a bit staggered by it. And like I say, hopefully, as David said, things do change, and I'm hopeful that it will. I think hopefully with the amount of black players in the Premier League now, there's going to be more ambition to manage at higher levels and work their ways up. So all these kind of things, I think, going forward should hopefully change.
Just indulge me for a second. Based on what we've been talking about here, and David's raised a number of good points, do you see that there is an issue that maybe football is struggling to appreciate?
You can go back to football, you can go back to society, can't you? I've grown up with my younger brother. I've witnessed racism. I've seen it in dressing rooms. I think it's just a reflection of society, unfortunately. And talking about this country in the UK, there's parts of it that I don't enjoy. You talked about potentially moving abroad. It would be something I would consider in the future. But I think it's a reflection of society, in my opinion.
Can I just finish on, this is not just a British sort of problem. This is a global sort of problem, because I just want to refer this quickly. We talk about the 1.6% of, percentage in terms of executive position and the 4.4% of managers. But you look throughout the leagues in the world, there is not many black managers in those leagues when you go on a global stage. So you think of Italy or Spain, in America, I've done the research. So you think about the scale of what we're talking about. It's quite remarkable.
Dwight, I want to stick with you to round off, give you the last word. It's your show. What is the way forward? Because I know you've in all the time I've known you're a student of the game. You travel, as you've been saying, all around the world. You glean whatever knowledge you can from watching football, working with younger players. What's next?
I think Kevin is right. I think there is more conversation, a platform like this to sort of take on these conversations a little bit more head on. I think we tend to talk in little bits of pockets. I think it must be elaborated a lot more. The facts and figures are there for everyone to see. And certainly the owners, the people who the decision makers have to look at themselves a little bit more in terms of credibility and giving the opportunities to black managers. I just think there is not enough of that. And the more conversation we have like this, I think the more platform we reached out and it more sort of educated everybody the problem that we face within the game, that black players continue to contribute to the game, but also want to contribute in the management department as well as the executive part of the game as well.
I agree with you both, and I think agree with you all. And I think there are, and it's the one thing I look at as a source of optimism for me. There are people at football clubs who do want to change the landscape. I don't believe that it's something that is deliberate, and I like to cling to that, whether rightly or wrongly. And I do believe that in this generation, we will get Dwight working. We will get others working who are in those WhatsApp groups and who might well be resigned to things not changing. We might even see a Dwight Yorke, Kevin Davies managerial team coming to a dugout near you soon. Listen, it's been an education. Big thanks to David Ornstein, Kevin Davies, and of course, Dwight Yorke. And thanks to you for watching.
Well, we certainly hope you enjoyed that illuminating discussion. Certainly, we're not going to lose sight of it on this pod. In fact, we're going to continue to shine a light on diversity in management, ownership, and all football structures. For now, happy holidays. Enjoy your Christmas for those who celebrate. And we can't wait to see you around Africa's biggest prize soon. Ciao for now. Take care.